Hegel's Philosophy of Mind Summary. Section 2. The objective of mind is morality. Das Ziel des Geistes. Subsection B. The morality of conscience. Moralität. Übersection BB. Civil society. Der bürgerliche Gesellschaft. Super subsection B. Administration of justice. Die Rechtspflege. Encyclopedia Section 529. When matured through the operation of natural need and free option into a system of universal relationships and a regular course of external necessity, the principle of causal particularity gets the stable articulation which liberty requires in the shape of formal rights. Infrasection 1. The actualization which right gets in this sphere of mere practical intelligence is that it be brought to consciousness as the stable universal, that it be known and stated in its specificity with the voice of authority, the law. Dices. Encyclopedia Section 530, Infrasection 2, the positive form of laws to be promulgated and made known as laws is a condition of the external obligation to obey them, inasmuch as, being laws of strict right, they touch only the abstract will, itself at bottom external, not the moral or ethical will, the subjectivity to which the will has in this direction a right is here only publicity. This subjective existence is as existence of the essential and developed truth in this sphere of right, at the same time an externally objective existence as universal authority and necessity. Encyclopedia Section 531, Infrasection 3. Legal forms get the necessity to which objective existence determines itself in the judicial system. Abstract right has to exhibit itself to the court, to the individualized right, as proven, a process in which there may be a difference between what is abstractly right and what is provable right. The court takes cognizance and action in the interest of right as such, deprives the existence of right of its contingency, and in particular transforms this existence as this exists as revenge into punishment. See section 500. Encyclopedia Section 532. The function of judicial administration is only the function of judicial administration is only to actualize to necessity that abstract side of personal liberty in civil society. But this actualization rests at first on the particular subjectivity of the judge, since here as yet there is not found the necessary unity of it with right in the abstract. Conversely, the blind necessity of the system of wants is not lifted up into the consciousness of the universal and worked from that period of view. Section 2. The objective of mind is morality. Das Ziel des Geistes. Subsection B. The morality of conscience. Moralität. Übersection BB. Civil society. Die bürgerliche Gesellschaft. Supra subsection C. Police and corporation. Die Polizia und die Corporation. Encyclopedia Section 533. Judicial administration naturally has no concern with such parts of actions and interests as belongs only to particularity, and leaves to chance not only the occurrence of crimes, but also the care for public weal. In civil society, the sole end is to satisfy want, and that because it is man's want is a result also from circumstances of locality, from the connections between nation and nation, from errors and deceptions which can be foisted upon single members of the social circulation and are capable of creating disorder in it, as also and especially from the unequal capacity of individuals to take advantage of that general stock. The, own, the onward march of this necessity also sacrifices the very particularities by which it is brought about, and does not itself contain the affirmative aim of securing the satisfaction of individuals. So far as concerns them, it may be far from beneficial, yet here the individuals are the morally justifiable end. Encyclopedia Section 534, to keep in view this general end, to ascertain the way in which the powers composing that social necessity act, and their variable ingredients, and to maintain that end in them and against them, is the work of an institution which assumes, on one hand, to the concrete of civil society, the position of an external universality. Such an order acts with the power of an external state, which, insofar as it is rooted in the higher or substantial state, appears as state police. On the other hand, in this sphere of particularity, the only recognition of the aim of substantial universality and the only carrying of it is restricted to the business of particular branches and interests. Thus, we have the corporation in which the particular citizen, in his private capacity, finds the securing of his stock, whilst at the same time he in it emerges from his single private interest and has a conscious activity for the comparatively universal end, just as in his legal and professional duties he has his social morality. Section 2, the objective of mind. Thus the Il das Geist, subsection B, the morality of conscience, Moralität, Übersection CC, the state. Encyclopedia Section 535. The state is the self conscious ethical substance, the unification of the family principle with that of civil society. The same unity which is in the family as a feeling of love, in its essence, receiving, however, at the same time, through the second uniform general way, so as to secure the satisfaction, but the machinery of social necessity leaves in many ways a casualness about this satisfaction. This is due to the variability of wants themselves, in which opinion and subjective good pleasure play a great part. It principle of conscience and spontaneous it it is principle of conscience and spontaneously active volition, the form of conscious universality. This universal principle, with all its evolution in detail, is the absolute aim and content of the knowing subject, which thus identifies itself in its volition with the system of reasonableness. Encyclopedia Section 536, the state is Quantum Section Introduction, Alpha, its inward structure as a self relating development, constitutional interstate law. Quantum Section Introduction, Beta, a particular individual and therefore in connection with other particular individuals, international outer state law. Quantum Section Introduction, Gamma, but these particular minds are only stages in the general development of mind in its actuality. Universal History. Section 2, the objective of the mind is morality, thus the Il des Geistes, subsection B, the morality of conscience, Moralität, Übersection CC, the state, quantum section alpha, constitutional law. Inneres Staatsrecht. Encyclopedia Section 537, the essence of the state is the universal, self-originated and self-developed, the reasonable spirit of will, but as self-knowing and self-actualizing, sheer subjectivity, and as an actuality, one individual. That's moi. Its work generally in relation to the extreme of individuality as the multitude of individuals consists in a double function. First, it maintains them as persons, thus making right a necessary actuality. Then it promotes their welfare, which each originally takes care of for himself, but which has a thoroughly general side. It protects the family and guides civil society. Secondly, it carries back both and the whole disposition and action of the individual, whose tendency is to become a center of his own, into the life of the universal substance, and in this direction, as a free power, it interferes with those subordinate spheres and retains them in substantial eminence. Encyclopedia Section 538, the laws express the special provisions for objective freedom. First, to the immediate agent, his independent self will and particular interest, they are restrictions, but secondly, they are an absolute final end and the universal work. Hence, they are a product of the functions of the various orders which parcel themselves more and more out of the general particularizing and are a fruit of all the acts and private concerns of individuals. They, thirdly, they are the substance of the volition of individuals, which volition is thereby free and of their disposition, being as such exhibited as current usage. Encyclopedia Section 539, as a living mind, the state only is as an organized whole, differentiated into particular agencies, which, proceeding from the one notion, though not known as notion of the reasonable will, continually produce it as their result. The Constitution is this articulation or organization of state power. It provides for the reasonable will, insofar as it is in the individuals only implicitly the universal will, coming to a consciousness and an understanding of itself and being found, also for the will being put in actuality through the action of the government and its several branches and not left to perish, but protected both against their casual subjectivity and against that of the individuals. The Constitution is existent justice, the actuality of liberty in the development of all its reasonable provisions. Encyclopedia Section 540, the guarantee of a constitution, in essence, the necessity that the laws be reasonable and their actualization secured, lies in the collective spirit of the nation, especially in the specific way in which it is itself conscious of its reason. Religion is that consciousness in its absolute substantiality. The guarantee of a constitution, in essence, the necessity that the laws be reasonable and their actualization secured, lies in the collective spirit of the nation, especially in the specific way in which it is itself conscious of its reason. Religion is that consciousness in its absolute substantiality, but the guarantee lies also at the same time in the actual organization or developments of that principle in suitable institutions. The Constitution presupposes that consciousness of the collective spirit and conversely, that spirit presupposes the Constitution, for the actual spirit only has a definite consciousness of its principles insofar as it has them actually existent before it. Encyclopedia Section 541. The really living totality. The really living totality, that which preserves, in other words, continually produces the state in general and in its constitution, is the government. The organization which natural necessity gives is seen in the rise of the family and of the estates of civil society. The government is the universal part of the Constitution. In essence, the part which intentionally aims at preserving those parts, but at the same time gets hold of and carries out those general aims of the whole which rise above the function of the family and of civil society. The organization of the government is likewise its differentiation into powers, as their peculiarities have a basis in principle, yet without that difference losing touch with the actual unity they have in the notion subjectivity. Encyclopedia Section 542. In the government, regarded as organic totality, the sovereign power principate is, Infrasection A, subjectivity as the infinite self unity of the notion and its development. Subjectivity as the infinite self unity of the notion and its development, the all sustaining, all decreeing will of the state, its highest peak in all pervasive unity, in the perfect form of the state in which each and every element of the notion has reached free existence. This subjectivity is not a so called moral person, or a decree issuing from a majority, forms in which the unity of the decreeing will has not an actual existence, but an actual individual, the will of a decreeing individual, monarchy. The monarchical constitution is therefore the constitution of developed reason. All other constitutions belong to the lower grades of the development and realization of reason. Encyclopedia Section 543, Infrasection B. The particular government power there emerges first, the division of the state business into its branches, otherwise defined legislative power, administration of justice or judicial power, administration and police, and its consequent distribution between particular boards or offices, which, having their business appointed by law, to that end and for that purpose, possess independence of action, without at the same time ceasing to stand under higher supervision. Secondly, 2, there arises the participation of several in state business who together constitute. Secondly, there Secondly, 2, there arises the participation of several in state business who together constitute the general order. See for reference Encyclopedia Section 528. Who together constitute the general order insofar as they take on themselves the charge of universal ends as the essential function of their particular life. The further condition for being able to take individually part in this business being a certain training, aptitude, and skill for such ends. Training, aptitude, and skill. Encyclopedia Section 544. The Estates Collegium, or Provincial Council, is an institution by which all such as belong to civil society in general and are to that degree private persons participate in the governmental power, especially in legislation, vis-a-vis such legislation as concerns the universal scope of those interests which do not, like peace and war, involve the, as it were, personal interference and action of the state as one man, and therefore do not belong specifically to the province of the sovereign power. By virtue of this participation, subjective liberty and conceit, and with their general opinion, by virtue of this participation, subjective liberty and conceit, with their general opinion, can show themselves palpably efficacious and enjoy the satisfaction of feeling themselves to count for something. Encyclopedia Section 545, the final aspect of the state is to appear in immediate actuality as a single nation marked by physical conditions. As a single individual it is exclusive against other like individuals. In their mutual relations, waywardness and chance have a play, for each person is the aggregate in their mutual relations, waywardness and chance have a place, for each person in the aggregate is autonomous. The universal of law is only postulated between them and not actually existent. This independence of a central authority reduces disputes between them to terms of mutual violence. A state of war, to meet which the general estate in the company assumes the particular function of maintaining the state's independence against other states and becomes the estate of bravery. Encyclopedia Section 546. This state of war shows the omnipotence of the state in its individuality, an individuality that goes even to abstract negativity. Country and fatherland then appear as the power by which the particular independence of individuals and their absorption in the external existence of possession and in natural life is convicted of its own nullity, and the power which procures the maintenance of the general substance by the patriotic sacrifice on the part of these individuals of this natural and particular existence, so making nugatory, the nugatoriness that confronts it. Section 2, the objective of mind is morality. Das Ziel des Geistes. Subsection B, the morality of conscience, Moralität. Übersection CC, the state. Quantum section beta, external public laws. Das äußere Staatsrecht. Encyclopedia section 547. In the game of war, the independence of states is at stake. In one case, the result may be the mutual recognition of free national individualities. See for reference Encyclopedia section 430. And by peace conventions supposed to be forever, both this general recognition and the special claims of nations on one another are settled and fixed. External state rights rest partly on these positive treaties, but to that extent contain only rights falling short of true actuality. See for reference section 545. Partly on so called international law, the general principle of which is its presupposed recognition by the several states. It thus restricts their otherwise unchecked action against one another in such a way that the possibility of peace is left, and distinguishes individuals as private persons, non belligerents, from the state. In general, international law rests on social usage. Section 2, the objective of mind is morality. Das Ziel des Geistes, subsection B, the morality of conscience, Moralität, Übersection CC, the state, quantum section gamma, universal history, die Weltgeschichte. Encyclopedia section 548. As the mind of a special nation is actual and its liberty is under natural conditions, it admits on this nature side the influence of geographical and climatic qualities. It is in time, and as regards its range and scope, has essentially a particular principle on the lines of which it must run through a development of its consciousness and its actuality. It has, in short, a history of its own, but as a restricted mind, its independence is something secondary, it passes into universal world history, the events of which exhibit the dialectic of the several national minds, the judgment of the world. Encyclopedia Section 549. This movement is the path of liberation for the spiritual substance, the deed by which the absolute final aim of the world is realized in it, and the merely implicit mind achieves consciousness and self consciousness. It is thus the revelation and actuality of its essential and completed essence, whereby it becomes to the outward eye a universal spirit, a world mind. As this development is in time and in real existence, as it is a history, its several stages and steps are the national minds, each of which, as single and endowed by nature with a specific character, is appointed to occupy only one grade and accomplish one task in the whole deed. Encyclopedia Section 550. This liberation of mind, in which it proceeds to come to itself and to realize its truth, and the business of doing so, the liberation of mind, Encyclopedia Section 550. This liberation of mind, in which it proceeds to come to itself and to realize its truth, and the business of so doing, is the supreme right, the absolute law. The self consciousness of a particular nation is a vehicle for the contemporary development of the collective spirit in its actual existence. It is the objective actuality in which that spirit for the time invests its will. Against this absolute will, the other particular natural mind Against this absolute will, the other particular natural minds have no rights. That nation dominates the world, but yet the universal will steps onward over its property for the time being, as over a special grade, and then delivers it over to its chance and doom. Encyclopedia Section 551. To such as To such extent as this business of actuality appear as an action, and therefore as a work of individuals, these individuals, as regards the substantial issue of their labor, are instruments, and their subjectivity, which is what is peculiar to them, is the empty form of activity. What they personally have gained, therefore, through the individual share they took in the substantial business, prepared and appointed independently of them, is formal universality or subjective mental idea, fame, which is their reward. Encyclopedia Section 552. The national spirit contains nature necessity and stands in external existence. See, for reference, Encyclopedia Section 423. The ethical substance, potentially infinite, is actually a particular and limited substance. See Encyclopedia Sections 549 and 550. The national spirit contains nature necessity and stands in external existence. The ethical substance, potentially infinite, is actually a particular and limited substance. On its subjective side, it labors under contingency in the shape of its unreflective natural usages, and its content is presented to it as something existing in time and tied to an external nature and external world. The spirit, however, which thinks in this moral organism, overrides and absorbs within itself the finitude attaching to it as national spirit in its state and the state's temporal interest in the system of laws and usages. It rises to apprehend itself in its essentiality. Such apprehension, however, still has the eminent limitedness of the national spirit, but the spirit which thinks in universal history, stripping off at the same time those limitations of the several national minds and its own temporal restrictions, lays hold of its concrete universality and rises to apprehend the absolute mind as the eternally actual truth in which the contemplative reason enjoys freedom, while the necessity of nature and the necessity of history are only ministrant to its revelation and the vessels of its honor. End of the summary of Section 2.